Welcome to our video lecture on topic 6.6, hormones and reproduction. Please note that these are not the whole entire hormones of the whole entire 6.6. I'm just focusing on reproduction pieces here. There are some other hormones involved in homeostasis that are not included in this lecture, but that you do also need to know about. Our essential understanding for today: hormones are used when signals need to be widely distributed. Our objectives: we're going to review endocrine glands, we're going to describe anabolic hormones, testosterone, human growth hormone, we're going to outline the function of the SRY gene and the TDF protein, we're going to describe functions of testosterone, we're going to state the names and functions of structures of the male reproductive system, we'll do the same thing for the female reproductive system, we're going to describe the functions of estrogen, progesterone, FSH, and LH, other hormones, we're going to talk about the hormonal changes that regulate the menstrual cycle, and then we will wrap up with a little look at IVF. First up, let's look at a little bit of a review of the endocrine system. So it is a system of ductless glands that release chemicals that are hormones into the bloodstream to regulate some body functions. That's different from exocrine. Exocrine glands have little ducts. So here's the gland, here's the duct. Substances get put into the duct and then sent through that duct to wherever it needs to go. Mammary glands, sweat glands are examples of exocrine glands. We're going to be talking about endocrine. They do not have those ducts. These hormone things that endocrine glands make, they are chemical messengers transported through the bloodstream to act on very distant target cells. Those hormones are super specific. They only act on target cells, and the endocrine system is quite a bit more, it's slower to get started, but then the response is more prolonged and also more widespread as compared to nervous system signals. Here's a lovely BioNinja diagram showing endocrine signaling. So we've got the endocrine gland here, releasing those hormones here. Those hormones are going to travel through the bloodstream, and they're going to go right on past all of the cells and tissues that do not have the correct receptors until they get to the target cells that do have the right receptors. They'll bind, and then signals will initiate whatever response needs to happen. So here are lots of endocrine glands. We're going to talk about a lot of these today. Hypothalamus, pituitary, and there's another one in here, the pineal gland. These are all in the brain. The thyroid glands in the throat, we're going to talk about that. Adrenal glands sit on top of the kidneys. We're not talking about the adrenal glands today, but we have in the past talked about adrenaline and noradrenaline, also known as epinephrine or norepinephrine. These are produced by the adrenal glands and have an impact on metabolism and heart rate, breathing rate, when we have that fight or flight response. Pancreas is pretty cool. It is an endocrine gland. It is also an exocrine gland. It is both endo and exo, which is pretty cool. The exocrine gland function of the pancreas we've already talked about back when we did digestion, topic 6.1. So when the pancreas produces those enzymes that are sent to the small intestine, the lipase, the endonucleases, proteases are going to be released through exocrine functions of the pancreas sent to the small intestine for digestion. Pancreas is also an endocrine gland when it makes insulin and glucagon. We're going to talk about that today. It is part of the endocrine function of the pancreas. And then we also have ovaries and testicles or testes. These guys are making our reproductive hormones, which we're going to focus on mostly today. Lots of a flow chart here showing us relationships between hypothalamus, pituitary, and target organs. So the pituitary gland is known as the master gland, but really the hypothalamus is in charge of it. So is it actually the master? I don't know. So hypothalamus is going to make some signals, ADH, oxytocin, that get sent to the posterior, that's in the back, the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland, and then the pituitary just sends those out into the bloodstream. ADH is antidiuretic hormone, acts on the kidney to regulate water levels in the body. Oxytocin is going to act on mammary glands and also the uterus during childbirth and then post-childbirth to help us make some milk, get that milk production started, and then prolactin actually helps to finish up that milk making function. We have lots of other hormones produced by the hypothalamus. This is gonadotropin-releasing hormone. You do not need to remember that. But what's kind of cool is that the gonadotropin-releasing hormone acts on the anterior lobe. That's in the front part of the pituitary. And that's going to tell the pituitary to make FSH and LH. This is follicle-stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone. We're going to talk a lot about these today. FSH and LH will then be released, and they go act on the gonads, on the testes and the ovaries, and then testosterone, estrogen, progesterone are made. So lots of levels of regulation in here. So the gonadotropin-releasing hormone to the FSH, LH, to the progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, and then actually that estrogen, progesterone will go and act on the gonadotropin-releasing hormone and tell it to either make or not make FSH and LH. We're going to focus in now on some of those reproductive hormones. Testosterone is up first. Testosterone is considered an anabolic hormone. Testosterone has been manufactured and sold for the last century. And so the question is, if testosterone is available, should we make it equally available to all athletes so that they can all enhance their performance and then everybody can be equally stronger and faster? And that's fair, right? Hopefully your answer to that is no, we should not give everyone equal access to testosterone and make it acceptable, because we shouldn't care just about athletes' performance, we should also care about their health. So excessive amounts of testosterone, toxic to the liver, is going to impede the body's ability to make its own testosterone. That's going to result in the atrophy of the sex organs. People who abuse testosterone often have difficulties having babies if they want to have babies. So not a good idea, and yet we've been doing it for a while. In the 1930s, testosterone was given to German soldiers to improve their muscle mass and aggressiveness, and hopefully you're feeling like that's not a good idea. Similarly, human growth hormone can be used by men and women to stimulate muscle growth. So again, if everybody can take human growth hormone, should everybody be allowed to take human growth hormone? You can totally go to Canada and get yourself some shots of human growth hormone if you want to. Hopefully you're feeling like, no, it should not be a thing that is fair for everyone to use. Definitely some debilitating side effects, lots of pain, swelling, numbness, and then it also leads to high cholesterol levels, which again, we don't want to just make our athletes strong and fast. We should want to keep them healthy also. So I vote no human growth hormone acceptable for all athletes. So let's talk about how we get testosterone or not. So sex hormones, testosterone is involved in the determination of if you grow ovaries or testicles. So there is a gene on the Y chromosome. That gene is called the SRY gene, the SRY gene. The SRY gene, which is usually on a Y chromosome, is going to code for this protein called testes determining factor. So the SRY gene is going to make TDF, testes determining factor. If you have the SRY gene, then you make TDF during embryonic stages, and that is going to bind to some receptors, cause testosterone to be produced, and then as an embryo, as a fetus, you grow testicles and a penis. If you do not have that SRY gene, then you do not make TDF, and then you end up with ovaries instead. Interestingly, there are lots of mutations that can occur. So you could have a Y chromosome, but you could have a mutation, or your SRY gene could be missing. And so you could be XY, chromosomally male, but physiologically look female. Similarly, your X chromosome could have a mutation. There could have been some crossing over between the X and Y chromosome that put that SRY gene on an X chromosome instead of on the Y. And then you could be XX, chromosomally female, but physiologically you would be male. So lots of interesting in-betweens, XX, XY, most of the time female and male, but not necessarily. So let's say that you have a functional SRY gene that codes for that TDF protein, that testes determining factor protein. That protein is going to stimulate the production of testosterone during embryonic and fetal stages. That's going to cause that prenatal development of the male genitalia, the testicles, and the penis. Testosterone is actually produced in small quantities by the adrenal glands in males and females, but the great majority of testosterone comes from the testicles, from the testes, and that begins during puberty. So big increase in testosterone levels during puberty. That is going to stimulate the production of sperm and also develop male secondary sex characteristics like body hair and facial hair, increased muscle mass. This is the molecule testosterone. It looks a lot like cholesterol. So if you feel like you've seen this molecule before, it looks a lot like cholesterol. So you kind of have. So if the SRY gene is not present, or if it's mutated, then instead of testicles, you get ovaries. And this is partly stimulated by estrogen and progesterone that's in the mother's ovaries and then passes across the placenta. The fetuses that have the SRY gene will also get some estrogen and progesterone, but that testosterone kind of overwhelms it. If there's no testosterone there, then the estrogen and the progesterone help to induce the development of the ovaries instead of the testicles. Estradiol is another name for estrogen, so estrogen, progesterone, and then testosterone. Notice that these guys all look pretty similar, so definitely different molecules, but not grossly different, so very similar in terms of structure here. Let's talk about some male reproductive structures and their function. So I'm going to start here in the testes, also known as testicles. This is the site of sperm production. So sperm are produced in the testes and the testicles, millions and millions of them every single day. Those sperm, when they are mature, they go to these little structures, epididymis. So there are two, one on top of each testicle. So epididymis is for sperm storage. So mature sperm are stored here until they are released from the body. If they're not released, then they just die or reabsorbed, and then millions more are made the next day. If the sperm are going to be released, then they're going to go from the epididymis into these tubes. These tubes are known as the vas deferens. So there's one on each side going from each testicle. They kind of wrap around. The ureter here is coming from the kidneys. So kidneys are up here. Kidneys are going to send urine through the ureters to the bladder. The vas deferens is carrying sperm and semen from the testes to the urethra. On that path from the testicles to the urethra, there are a couple glands that get passed. The first gland, and there's one on each side, is the seminal vesicle. The job of the seminal vesicle is to secrete some fructose. That fructose is used by the sperm cells to produce lots and lots of ATP. They have a lot of work to do. They swim a very long distance, and so they need lots of sugar. This fructose helps them have the ATP necessary to get all the way into the fallopian tubes, which we'll talk about on the next slide. So the seminal vesicles are going to add some fructose so that the sperm can make some ATP. In the middle here is the prostate gland. The prostate gland is going to release some bicarbonate. The job of that bicarbonate is to make the semen just a little bit basic, a little bit alkaline or basic. That's going to help to counteract the acidity of the vagina. So the vagina is set up to prevent foreign stuff from getting into the body. It's quite acidic. The alkalinity of the bicarbonate coming from the prostate gland will neutralize the acidity of the vagina so that the sperm have a chance of surviving that environment. Once the fructose and the bicarbonate have been added to the semen, then it's all the sperm and the semen sent through the urethra. So notice that these two words are so close. Ureter goes from the kidneys to the bladder. Urethra goes from the vas deferens and from the bladder to out the body. So during ejaculation or during urination, the urethra is that path out of the body. Same thing over here, just from the side. We have the testicles are here. Epididymis sits on top of the testicles. Sperm production, sperm storage, and then the sperm will travel through the vas deferens, past seminal vesicle, past the prostate, into the urethra, and then out the body. Again, remember sperm production, sperm storage, sperm transportation. Seminal vesicle's job is to produce some fructose so that the sperm have lots of sugar to make some ATP. And the prostate gland's job is to make that bicarbonate, which is going to neutralize the acidity of the vagina's environment. And here are pieces and parts of the female reproductive system. So we were just talking about the acidity of the vagina. The vagina is here. It's also known as the birth canal because the babies come out that pathway. The semen from the penis will be released into the vagina, and then sperm will have to swim past the cervix. The cervix is a super strong muscle that stays closed most of the time. It will open up during childbirth and then also a little bit during menstrual cycles. The endometrium is the inner lining of the uterus. The uterus is a super strong muscle. If an embryo is formed, if fertilization occurs and an embryo is formed, then that embryo is going to get embedded into the endometrium of the uterus. A placenta will form, and then there will be growth and development of that embryo there. So the endometrium is the inner lining of the uterus. Uterus is that super strong muscle here. Uterus has two tubes. They are known as fallopian tubes, also known as oviducts. So oviduct, fallopian tube, same thing. If fertilization is going to occur, the sperm need to get through the vagina, past the cervix, through the whole entire uterus, and then into the oviduct. And then fertilization will occur in the oviduct. Eggs will meet the sperm here after they are released from the ovaries. So there are two ovaries. The jobs of the ovaries are to produce and then release the eggs. Eggs are going to move through the fallopian tube through the oviduct. If fertilization occurs, it occurs here, and then that zygote morula gastrula is going to get embedded into the endometrium of the uterus. Here is a side view. The ovary is here, fallopian tube, also known as the oviduct, is here. Uterus with the endometrial lining on the inside is here. Cervix is here. Vagina is here. On the male reproductive system, the urethra was the path for both the semen and the urine. Urethra in females is separate from the vagina. So bladder to urethra, urine here. Vagina is separate from the urethra in females. Estrogen and progesterone is produced by the ovaries that we were just looking at on that previous slide. So estrogen, progesterone, and then also FSH and LH coming from the pituitary are the hormones that regulate the menstrual cycle in people who have ovaries. So menstrual cycle controlled by both negative and positive feedback. Negative is like when things get too high, it goes back down. If it gets too down, it goes back up. Positive feedback is that I'm going to make more, I'm going to make more, I'm going to make more until I don't make any more. So we have both some negative and positive feedback mechanisms involved between these hormones coming from the ovaries, estrogen and progesterone coming from the pituitary, FSH and LH. The first hormone, the hormone that kind of gets the whole cycle started, is FSH. So FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. So follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, is going to literally stimulate follicles. Follicles are these little bubbles in the ovary. Those bubbles, these follicles are going to grow eggs. So we're going to get some of our eggs to mature. The follicles are also going to release estrogen. So we're going to use that FSH to get that development of an egg to start. And then we're also going to lead to that increase in estrogen. So increase in FSH first leads to an increase in estrogen next. It's also going to lead to the maturation of an egg in a follicle in the ovary. Interestingly, this increase in estrogen, this is one of our positive feedback mechanisms, is going to lead to an increase in LH. So LH is luteinizing hormone. There's the L. Luteinizing hormone is LH. The increase in estrogen leads to an increase in LH. The LH coming from the pituitary is actually going to lead to ovulation. So LH, luteinizing hormone, this big peak causes ovulation. Ovulation is the release of the egg from the follicle in the ovary. Ovulation, the release of the egg from the ovary, from the follicle in the ovary. And this is caused by LH, luteinizing hormone. There is this super cool wound that's kind of left where the egg pops out of the ovary. That's called the corpus luteum. So the corpus luteum is left on the ovary after the egg pops out. The job of the corpus luteum is to continue producing estrogen and progesterone for at least a little while. So lots of estrogen and progesterone. So estrogen stays, it goes down a little bit, but it doesn't go down all the way. Progesterone starts to increase. We still have that continued high, thick uterine lining if fertilization occurs. If fertilization occurs and the embryo embeds into the endometrial lining, then progesterone is going to stay high. Estrogen will stay high. The uterine lining will stay thickened so that there's a place for that embryo to grow. The corpus luteum will make that estrogen and progesterone for a while until the placenta develops enough, and then eventually the placenta will take over the production of the estrogen and the estrogen and progesterone. Super cool thing. So that estrogen and progesterone are going to inhibit more FSH and LH. So if progesterone stays high, then FSH is going to stay low and LH is going to stay low. And the reason is this: if you have an embryo here that is 1 week old, you definitely do not want to be releasing another egg in 2 weeks and have 2 embryos, fetuses growing in your uterus that have due dates that are a month apart. That would be challenging for childbirth. So this increase in progesterone and estrogen is going to inhibit, keep low this FSH and LH so that no more eggs are released if there's already an embryo growing in the uterus. This is how birth control pills work. So birth control pills are high levels of progesterone and estrogen. It tricks your pituitary, your hypothalamus and pituitary, into thinking that you're pregnant so that no more eggs are released. This is going to keep LH and FH levels low. It's going to maintain steady high levels of estrogen and progesterone, and then pregnancy should be prevented. If there is no fertilization, then what happens is, oops, I'm trying to erase all my scribbles. If there's no fertilization, then the corpus luteum will start to break down. Less progesterone, less estrogen is made. That decrease in estrogen and progesterone is going to lead to the sloughing off of the endometrial lining. A period will occur. All of this stuff will be released from the body. And then the whole thing happens all over again. So that reduction in estrogen and progesterone allows FSH to go back up, and then we start all over with the estrogen and then the LH and then the progesterone, and then fertilization may or may not occur. Good? So many details. It's really pretty amazing how many things, how many pieces and parts are involved in this process. Just a couple more topics, my friends. We are almost done. So we're going to talk about IVF, in vitro fertilization. So in vitro means in glass. That's different from in vivo, which means in the living organism in the body. So in vitro, we are looking at some external fertilization of embryos. This is treatment for people who are struggling to have a baby. So first, big drugs to suspend normal secretion of those hormones, FSH and LH, followed by huge doses of LH and FSH, and then also this guy, human chorionic gonadotropin. That is going to induce super ovulation. lots and lots of eggs. Those eggs, so many eggs in the ovaries being produced, they're actually pulled out of the ovaries. We're going to pull the eggs out of the ovaries. We're going to fertilize them outside the body. So sperm collected, eggs collected, put together in petri dish, and then these embryos are going to start to develop. Usually lots and lots of embryos are formed. They try to do usually 5 to 8 per treatment. Not all of them are viable, but generally 1 or 2 can then be implanted into the uterus of the mom. Again, lots and lots of hormone treatments helping to make all of this happen. And then the hope is that some of those embryos will stick. So again, usually 1 at a time, 1 or 2 at a time. You don't want to do all 8 in case they all 8 make it. That would be a lot of babies all at once. But this is how IVF works. It's pretty amazing. So how do we know all this stuff about reproduction? It started with this guy, William Harvey. So remember that William Harvey was the guy who was like, I don't think the blood ebbs and flows. I think there's actually a circuit. And he did that by putting tourniquets on people and then cutting off their blood flow, which was really cool and interesting. Harvey is also credited with debunking Aristotle's seed and soil theory of sexual reproduction. Aristotle, ancient Greek guy, said, I think that there are seeds in the semen, and when they get literally planted into the soil that is the menstrual blood, then an egg will start to grow from the seed in the semen, and then that's a baby. Harvey dissected a lot of deer after mating season. He's like, I can't find any seeds. I don't think Aristotle is correct. He didn't know it was correct because he didn't have good enough microscopes to see the eggs and the sperm cells. He couldn't see those very early stages of gastrulation, those first couple cells that are formed after fertilization. But he was able to say that Aristotle was wrong, but he didn't get very much further than that. He also dissected a lot of deer. And we did it. We talked about those endocrine glands, how they're different from exocrine glands. We talked about the anabolic hormones that build muscle mass and that we should not abuse them. We talked about that SRY gene that makes that TDF, testes determining protein. And if you have TDF, then you grow testicles. Testicles make testosterone. We talked about some of those functions of testosterone. We talked about those pieces and parts of the male reproductive system and the female reproductive system. We talked about estrogen, progesterone, FSH, and LH, and how all of those guys are involved in the menstrual cycle. And then we also wrapped up with that little look at IVF. Good work today.